me get rid of that mic muted there. That was a mistake. This is Hal, and welcome to Halitics. Hope you're doing well. It is a Monday, and we're going to kind of revisit what I normally do on Fridays. That is, have a bit of a free-for-all since last week we had guests pretty much throughout the week. I think maybe Monday I didn't have a guest, but otherwise we had folks joining us, and I thought it was great. I loved it. I loved having, gosh, I can't even remember all the folks we had. We had Carlos, we had the left-handed leftist on Friday, of course, Arlen Tuesday. We had a discussion about regenerative ag with Mary Rooker, which was she probably got a little bit of positive feedback. I was really appreciative of that from Kirsten, especially Kirsten Sade really enjoyed it, which doesn't surprise me because that's kind of up her alley. So we did have a guest, and of course Andy Ellis, a candidate for governor here in Maryland on the Green Party ticket. So lots of really good guests last week, but didn't really get a chance to kind of focus on stories from an outsider, from not from the insider, meaning the guest perspective, but my looking at the stories. So we didn't really get a chance to do that. Look at a couple of that, some of the social media posts I've been responding to. Some with some real disappointment in how people are looking at the news and feeling, as I often feel, the sense that at least my perspective, the views I try to impart to others in terms of how to look at the news, how we can make change, really aren't getting through. And that's no news. That's just the way it is. It's just there's such a stasis and such kind of an unwillingness, I think, especially on the left, not the far left, but the Democratic left, to explore alternatives. Just this hope, this completely, unsupported hope, kind of a blind faith in the Democratic Party, which has been over and over betrayed. That faith has been betrayed. So I don't get it. We're going to talk today about one of the, piece by Robert Reich, one of the guys I don't particularly agree with. I know Arlen's a big fan, Hartman too. These are people who really sheepdog you into the Democratic Party. And Reich's big take right now is that the Democrats just need to get rid of Chuck Schumer and, things will get better. It's Schumer's fault that they caved. I've heard some people say, yeah, it wasn't even worth keeping the government shut down. Maybe it wasn't. The real problem the Democrats face, I don't even, you can say it's a failure of leadership, but that if you have a problem with leadership that suggests that the followers would be willing to be led to a better place, and I don't think that's the case at all. Reich even kind of acknowledges it to a degree. Not really the way I would, though. His point is, well, they're all a bunch of cats. The Democrats, they all go off in different directions. Well, I don't agree with that. They'll go in the same direction. They'll pull in the same direction if it's a corporatist, centrist, moderate, pro-billionaire, or at least not anti-billionaire direction. Democrats are fine with that. The problem for them comes when there's actually an unabashed demand for better conditions for poor, struggling, and working people. That's when they're not willing to be led. And Chuck Schumer is a perfect embodiment of that philosophy, of that ideology. Yeah, I'll lead them down the middle. I'll lead them against labor. I'll lead them against consumers. I'll lead them in favor of war. What I won't do is lead them to raise taxes on the billionaires. What I won't do is lead them to demand truly socialized medicine. So that's the real problem. Chuck Schumer exemplifies the actual problem with the Democratic Party. He isn't the problem. Replacing him wouldn't solve the problem. He simply embodies the problem, as, of course, does his New York financial capital of the world counterpart, House Minority Leader Jeffries. All right, 240-242-5646. Hope you will join me. Give me a vine. Is that, who says that? Somebody's always saying, throw me a vine. I guess that was Rome, right? That just shows you how old I am, thinking about Jim Rome as somebody new. He was new, I guess, in the 1990s. 240-242-5646. So there they are. Those are two very poor leaders, and they are a problem, but they're not the problem. What the Democrat Party, at least those elected to office, wants is poor leaders. And that's exactly what they All right, 240-242-5646. Hope you'll join me. Let's go to the Middle East. Still really as bad, I don't know, as bad as possible. We're not seeing daily reports of 120 people killed in Gaza and Gaza City, even more ruins, more wreckage than before. It's already basically wrecked. There it is. There's an image of it. And Hamas, they're rejecting foreign guardianship of Gaza ahead of UN Security Council vote. So this is from earlier today. The UN Security Council going to vote whether there should be some kind of new kind of peacekeeping force, an international peacekeeping force sent into Gaza. And Hamas is saying, no, we don't want that. We can take care of it. Now, I think there does need to be, obviously, some kind of peacekeeping force in Gaza at this time. But ultimately, the only way there can be a solution to the problem is for Gaza to become truly independent, for there to be self-determination. Now, I know Carlos and I were talking about this, and Carlos saying, well, we really need a one-state solution. I agree. Gaza, the West Bank, Israel, they should all be one country, and they should all be one country where every single person who lives there, regardless of religion, has equal political power. Now, you want to say, well, there'll be immigrants and this and that, then yeah, there has to be, just like in this country, what there should be is some kind of path to citizenship. But yes, you're a resident, you've been living in that region, you were born in that region, you're a citizen. Period. End of story. And your vote counts exactly the same as every other vote. Of course, that should be the ultimate solution. That's the only solution that's fair, that's right, that's just. But given the fact that we're not at that point, there does need to be some kind of independent self-governing within Israel of Hamas, of Gaza, but there has to be within the greater country that we're talking about. That will be one single state called Palestine, no called Israel. I get that. There has to be some kind of true self-determination. The people who are living in the rubble right now, who are living in the refugee camps, have to be able to control their destiny. At the same time, because Israel and the United States destroyed Gaza, they need to be the ones who rebuild it. And I understand you want an independent peacekeeping force. Sure, have it be consisting of Arabs, have it consist of Palestinians and the like who are in control, not the Americans, not Israel. Some kind of international force. Sure, you can have Jordanians, Egyptians, Palestinians first and foremost making the decisions about what will happen, but there has to be clearly a framework for democracy, for self-determination, for self-governance, and ultimately one state. Now, that won't happen. So because of that, there's just really no good options. Unless you have a plan, which is ultimately a good plan, which will lead to a better result, then whatever you do is going to be a problem. Because Israel and the United States are bound and determined not to allow the people of Gaza to be free, to be liberated, to be to escape the jackboot of the Israeli thug on its neck, then I don't know what you do. I don't know what you do. I get what Hamas is saying. They're saying this plan that Israel and the United States have jammed down our throat, basically saying we're going to cut your throat and every other Gazan's throat unless you agree to this. This plan is not a path towards liberation for the people of Palestine. It's just a path for more genocide. It's more ethnic cleansing, more Lebensraum for Israel. Yes, that's true. Hamas is right. But having Hamas stay in charge isn't a good answer either. There is no good answer because ultimately the goal of the plan is a bad one. It's a terrible one. It's a cruel, inhumane, evil plan that Trump and Netanyahu hatched between them, mostly Trump, actually. I think because Netanyahu's plan, probably even worse, completely wiped the Palestinian people off the planet. Not sure that's exactly where Trump's going. I'm not sure where Trump is. I probably hasn't thought about it through. But either way, it can't answer. It can't solve the problem. And that's why Hamas is saying, no, we have to stay in power. And it's hard to say no to Hamas, because almost certainly foreign guardianship would likely be even worse. So I have an answer. The answer is we need to replace the U.S. government that's currently in power with a truly democratic, pro-Palestine, pro-life government that will say to Israel, no, you don't get to do what you want to do. And if you try, if you don't do exactly what we tell you, we're going to send the U.S. military in there and we're going to clear you out. We're not going to clear Gaza out. We're going to clear you out. That's the only way to solve this problem. And since that's not going to happen, I just fear worse times for the Palestinian people. 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. Now, if you had a true opposition party in this country, or more than one opposition party, if you had a party that was opposed to military tyranny, if you had a party that was opposed to oligopolies and monopolies and oligarchies and plutocracy, if you had a party like that, then they would be championing peace, permanent Palestinian rule, at least in Gaza, Palestinian self-determination. Of course they would, and that would be very popular. That's what the American people want. We don't have that. All right, just a little bit more news. Just want to give you from Al Jazeera, actually, before we get into the kind of the stuff about Chuck Schumer and Robert Reich and people who disagree with me, which is pretty much everybody on Facebook and everywhere else, have a sense of what I'm doing. From this is kind of like a man bites dog story, right? Like not what you'd expect. Israeli forces dismantle West Bank settler outpost. So what a surprise. Actually, Israeli settlers who were just totally running rampage over Palestinians were told to stop. And that outpost was actually dismantled. And it's very rare. That almost never happens. I'm sure those Israeli settlers are probably pretty livid right now. I'm sure they went in there with a wink and a nod from the army and from the government saying, yeah, go on. Of course, all the other settlements, no matter how much land they steal from Palestinians, no matter how disruptive they are, we're good with it. We like it. We support it. That's been the actually unofficial Israeli policy for 40, 50, whatever, however many years. But I guess things were getting a little too rowdy, a little too many people, too many TikTok videos and other videos showing the Israelis just oppressing, persecuting, beating up, hurting, killing Palestinians on the West Bank. Finally, Israel had to do something, so they finally did. But make no mistake, this does not bespeak any change in Israeli policy. They're going to continue to occupy and continue to dice up and parcel out the lands on the West Bank to Israelis, to Jews, because they want a Jewish state. October was one of the worst months ever recorded for settler violence against Palestinians as they tried to conduct their harvest. Many attacks take place under the observation of, or even. So that's the government that we support. That, by the way, also provides with our taxpayer money universal health care, something we don't get. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. Would love to talk to you. I will check, since do not have a guest. Sometimes they give me a little bit more opportunity to check out what's in the chat. And you can hear I just went up there. We've got Splash and Ari. It just shows you there's something really messed up because it said there's one viewer, but we have more than one. We have Splash and we have Ari in there at least. So I know we have two because they're commenting. I'm sure there's others who aren't commenting. So good to see you guys. Thanks for joining me. Yeah, he says, Splash says, I don't care what they call that region, the Eastern Mediterranean country, as long as everybody in the territory has equal rights, seems like the bare minimum. You think? Yeah, I would agree. This program has not been friendly to Montgomery Council member Kristen Mink, at least not of late. I used to consider Kristen a friend. I think she did too. We've had our pretty significant differences on a number of issues. and it's really come to a head, I think, with the Maryland Israel Development Center. She does not respond to me. I'm persona non grata to her, and of course, as a councilwoman, she has far more power and influence than I'll ever have, I'm sure. But I want to give her props. And by the way, speaking of, just one more point about Mink. Andy from the Green Party, who's running for governor, was on last week, and he was critical of Kristen Mink, saying she's not a progressive. And I understood why he said that, and I have a lot of problems with Kristen. Would I vote for her? Probably not, because I can't vote for anyone who supports the Israeli genocide, and she is voting for the Maryland Israel Development Center. She will not vote against it. But to give her absolutely, by the way, 5 watching Cornell. Yeah, I get weird numbers here, man. I don't know what that's about. Sometimes I see the numbers. Maybe it's gone up. I'll have to check and see what I have here. Can't even tell how many are watching on my end, which is, I guess, because I'm not signed in. I need to sign in. All right, maybe I will sign in. And I wish it would mute. There we go. Yeah, I get weird stuff with all my tech. And I'd like to think I'm good at it. By the way, I watched a video today, just in terms of tech, because I'm such a geek. I'm such a nerd. I saw this guy who's pretty good. He does a lot of stuff on ThinkPads, tech guy. And he was extolling the ThinkPad T530 as the best ThinkPad ever. ThinkPads are the best laptops ever, unless maybe. But also they don't have that little touch point in the middle, which I use, to move the mouse around, the little red thing in the middle. Some people call it a nipple. The T520, in my opinion, best ThinkPad, not the T530. He says the T530. T520 is the better keyboard, the original IBM Selectric style typewriter keyboard, if you remember those from the 80s. Best typewriter keyboard of all time, probably. And the T531 with the chiclet style, which isn't as good. Now, the guy who I'm talking about, I forget his name. He's good. He's really good, though. He does good videos. He said the 530 is better. Now, you can put in a chiclet style keyboard, or rather, you can replace the chiclet style with the 7-row keyboard in the 530. But it's a lot of work. It's not a perfect fit, and it doesn't work perfectly. So I'm not going to endorse the 530 as the best ThinkPad, and hence the best laptop ever. The best laptop ever is the ThinkPad T5. By the way, 13 years, 2011, still using mine. It's great. The only thing is it's a little slow, not great for video editing. I have to do my video editing on my desktop, which is what I use here. All right, Kristen Mink got a lot of shade here, not one of our faves. She gets a lot of credit for this video. Here she is videotaping ICE thugs in Montgomery County, Maryland. Let's see. So here she posts this on Instagram, and I'll just mute it for a second. She posted this on Instagram. She describes what you're seeing here. And, look, I mean, it took a lot of guts, I think, to do this. It really, would I have done it? Probably, because in the moment, it didn't feel like she was taking risk. But you will see that these scary big dudes come after her. And she calls this terrorizing of our community. She's absolutely right. That's exactly what this is.
Come on over here. Come here. Hey, I told you about that shit. Get away. Did I tell you about that? Get away. Come on. Stay where you are. Go.
Don't touch me.
You need to go.
You can see the thugs approaching her.
You gotta go.
This fascist.
Go.
Don't touch me.
Who are just saying no to democracy, pushing her around. It's really, this is a Montgomery County Council member elected to office. Now they're going to threaten her with their car.
Flickers Monday morning. This vehicle looks like it's about to drive into me.
And then they zoom off. So I guess they realized they really couldn't, they could arrest her, but they would be in trouble if they did that. Probably not. Trump's going to pardon them and this and that, but still you're violating her constitutional rights if you try to take her camera away from her, if you accost her without providing any kind of due process. Obviously, they've been under some kind of orders to soft pedal. Plus, you have somebody who is, Congress council member. They may or may not have recognized her. So they backed off a little tiny bit. But this is what the Trump administration is doing to our country, tearing it apart. People who have lived here maybe and there was a good article about this in the New York Times. I don't always agree with the New York Times, of course, but they did a really good job exposing how 70+% of the people that ICE is accosting, arresting, are actually in this country legally. They're legally here. I know some of you are saying, well, they're illegals. What part of illegal don't you understand? Now, even that argument, I don't find in the least bit compelling and persuasive. They're human beings. If they come here for a better life because America's totally, which is the case almost always, America's totally disrupted their economies, has installed thugs, military tyrants. And by the way, that's a bipartisan thing, right? The Hillary Clinton, Honduras, putting a right-wing dictator in charge, empowering him, fomenting a coup over a socialist elected that back in the 2000s. That's something that Hillary did. So it's both parties. But the people who come to this country are desperate for a better life. They don't leave where they grew up, the area, the town where they live, they've always lived in, the city that they're familiar with. They don't leave that, the countryside, because, oh, it's so great to be in America. I want to be in America. It's because life is insupportable where they are now. And it's largely our fault, the fault of the U.S. government. So even those of you who bash and attack immigrants, I don't find that because they're illegal. I don't find that a compelling argument. I do recognize, however, that elites use surplus labor to drive the price of labor down. And I also recognize that elites take advantage of people who don't have the right documentation. So this is a win-win for the billionaire class. I get it. I get that. But what our task is to join together to provide a better deal, to insist on a better deal for people in the global south, and to protect workers in this country. That's our task. Not to countenance abusive treatment people the way Trump and his minions are doing. Now, of course, we don't have a party that champions that either, although Kristen Mink is a Democrat and she is going after ICE. So I give her credit for that. The problem is, again, the hyperpartisanship. You can only take her so far in terms of her credibility as a true pro-life, pro-worker, pro-peace advocate. Because she supports the Maryland Israeli Development Center. Because she won't call out her own party. Because she went up to Pennsylvania and led canvasses for Kamala, who, by the way, was lamenting the fact that Trump didn't build a wall. So, no, you get major props for that. Good people do good things there. Kristen, you did a good thing. But unfortunately, you've done a lot of bad things too. And like all of us, you're complicated. I did want to have her on my program. I reached out. She wouldn't join me, unfortunately. 240-242-5646 if you want to be part of Halitics. The problem that I see is that Democrats, like Republicans, are partisan. Democrats, like Republicans, are corrupt. Democrats, like Republicans, take orders from elites rather than do what's best for their constituents. There's many reasons for this. The solution has to be threatening them from the left, not supporting them when they don't do what's right for the American people. Now, I think a good example of that was Zoran Mamdani, right? He threatened a Democratic establishment, elite, corrupt crook, Andrew Cuomo, and he won. Now that's really good, but the problem is, where's the next challenge to Mamdani from the left going to be? That's what AOC did, right? She challenged Joe Crowley from the left. That was a good thing. She challenged for about a day Nancy Pelosi from the left. That's a good thing. Where's the challenge to Pelosi's left? Where's the challenge to the squad to say you've got to be accountable? Not to Nancy Pelosi. You've got to be not to the donor class. You've got to be accountable to the voters. Where's that counter, that effective balance on the left. There isn't one. That's why we need to support Greens whenever there's a good one running, and they're running against a bad Democrat. Now, according to Robert Reich, that isn't the problem. According to Robert Reich, and it's unsurprisingly that he would say that the problem isn't that there is no progressive alternative to the Democratic Party. There's no left alternative. There's no populist alternative to the Democratic Party. It's no surprise that Robert Reich would refuse to even consider that as a possibility because he's labored his entire life within the Democratic Party, and it served him very, very well. He has an enormous base of, followers on Substack, I guess, and he had a very successful career at Cal as a professor and written books and all that. Got to be in the Clinton administration. He hasn't had as much power maybe as he thinks he's had. He hasn't been able to make the change he might have wanted if he is a true leftist. But still, for him, for Robert Reich, life is pretty damn good. For his family, life is pretty damn good. You abandon the Democratic Party, and suddenly your powerful, well-placed friends, they ain't going to be taking your calls anymore. So rather than saying the problem is, why are Democrats like Republicans so corrupt? Why are Democrats unwilling to fight for working people? The question he asks is, well, why are Democrats so undisciplined and Republicans so regimented? That's the problem, is they're undisciplined, those Democrats. Actually, as we'll go through a few examples, Democrats are quite disciplined depending on the issue. They're quite willing to follow their leaders, and Republicans often not so much. So his entire premise is false. But he makes the argument because what he really wants to do, or what is the service of that argument is, we got to get rid of Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer couldn't hold his team together because Democrats are undisciplined. He should have been able to, but still, as a leader, he should have been able to as a leader, even though Democrats are undisciplined. So the problem was, Reich isn't going to argue that the shutdown was a bad idea, or that Schumer shouldn't have ended the shutdown, or the shutdown should have continued. He believes, Reich, that the shutdown should have continued. It was a bad ending. Democrats got nothing from it, which we all agree. And now some would argue, well, they never could have gotten anything from it, so you might as well declare victory and go home. I don't agree with that. I think there were some real political benefits that were accruing to Democrats. We could see Trump was becoming less and less popular. He's still becoming less and less popular. And actually, just to kind of argue with myself here, maybe it was good that the shutdown ended, because when it ended, Mike Johnson did swear in Adelita Grijalva. She signed off on releasing the Epstein files. And some reports have come out and they make Trump look really, really bad. Now Trump has even said, release the files, release the Kraken, because he's shrewd enough to recognize he's better off at this point not fighting the release, because it just makes him look really, really bad, and trying to explain away his mentions, by the many mentions of him by Epstein. Epstein, of course, being dead, can't respond, can't refute anything Trump says. And so is Virginia Giuffre, who apparently had also spent time with Trump. She's dead too, so she can't refute what he has to say. Ghislaine Maxwell is in some, Fed camp right now. She's not in like high security, maximum security. She's not in some miserable prison anymore. She's in some sort of, minimum security resort. I guess they call it Fed resort, whatever they call it. I don't know. It's not so bad. And so she's not talking. She was talking. She was going to talk, but she's not talking. So maybe Trump figures, let's just pretend there's nothing in there, and I'll just say, go ahead, release the records, and I'll just say it's no big deal. And some people argue, better that than fighting this tooth and nail and looking like I have something, which I do have, to hide. So you can make an argument that ending the government shutdown actually benefited the Democrats, because it allowed Grijalva to be the vote in favor of releasing the Epstein records. Not clear if they will definitely be released, all of them, but some are definitely. And maybe they will now, because Trump's is pulling his opposition for it. Regardless, the Democrats should not have ended the shutdown fight. They should have kept the fight going. It was working for them. It was working politically for them. They could even use Johnson's refusal to seat Grijalva as more of an argument that they're just trying to hide the Epstein files from the American public. They're trying to cover up Trump's complicity, Trump's involvement in sex trafficking of minors, and his abuse of children. That's what they should have kept arguing. But according to Reich, they just stopped doing it because Chuck Schumer couldn't hold his senators together who aren't wanting to stay together anyway at a time when unity and toughness were essential. So this means Schumer must go. The problem with Reich's argument is it's just wrong. It's just fundamentally wrong. Schumer was able to hold his senators together perfectly well. He wanted the shutdown done. That's the problem. Even Ro Khanna gets it. Ro Khanna flat out said, yeah, he didn't meet the moment. It wasn't that he didn't meet the moment, according to Khanna, because he couldn't hold his senators together. He didn't meet the moment because he didn't want the shutdown to continue. He knew exactly what was going on. What happened was what Chuck Schumer wanted. That is what Ro Khanna is saying. In other words, Reich's claim that Schumer wanted to continue the shutdown but couldn't hold the caucus together, that's not what happened at all. Chuck Schumer betrayed the American people. Chuck Schumer betrayed Democratic voters who were adamant that this should continue. Here's what Khanna said. He's the leader of the Senate. The deal would have never happened if he had not blessed it. That's a direct quote. I don't have the audio or video up for you, but that is what he said. This is in CBS News. They kept Schumer in the loop the whole time. Reich is telling you something that's false. And it's so frustrating. He's telling you that because he wants you to stay within the Democratic fold no matter what. He doesn't want you to understand that the Democratic leader and the Democratic senators were in cahoots to do what you don't want them to do. Instead, he wants you to believe, oh, if we could just get another leader, things would be better. Sure, they're undisciplined, but that's not the Democrats are disciplined. They're disciplined to do the wrong thing. They're disciplined to go along with what their billionaire donors want, their Zionist donors want, no matter how much you oppose it. And Robert Reich won't tell you that. In fact, he'll tell you just the opposite. We've got to move on from these Dem sheepdogs. We've got to move on from Democratic and Republican-controlled media, from elite-controlled media. Who in any newspaper that you read today, who on any network television news program or cable news program for that matter is speaking truth to power on any real issue? I would say the only examples, actually Tucker isn't even on, right? Carlson isn't even on. Now, I'm not a Carlson fan, certainly not when it comes to conservative economic policy, which he champions, libertarian economic policy. Not at all. But he did speak truth to power repeatedly when it came to foreign policy. Adamant opponent of the Ukraine war with Russia, proxy war forever with Russia. Adamant opponent of American foreign policy, promoting that war, fomenting that war rather than trying to stop it. More and more, Carlson spoke out against the Israeli genocide. He's gone. He was fired. He's done. There's no truth teller. Corporate media. You got to go to YouTube. You got to go to people like me. And you know what? I wish that weren't the case. I really do. Because we're just, not that we're so small. Some of the true populist, progressive, liberals, or whatever, leftists do have big audience. I actually don't know who they are because I don't really consider Kulinski to be that far to the left. He did support Marianne for president. He supported Kamala for president. How far to the left could Kulinski be? Yeah, he's got 2 million. Sam Cedar's been pretty good. I guess Breaking Points with Crystal's pretty good, although she did certainly support Harris. The only people that I would say are truly on the side of the American people against both parties, maybe Breonna Joy Gray. She's got a few 100,000 subs. Maybe Do Distance Bros, they got a few 100,000 subs, maybe. And even the Do Distance Bros, I'm not always totally in sync with them. I'm not in sync with everybody, with anybody completely. But as close to anybody as I am, it's with Brianna Joy Gray. And she struggles not like me. She's doing a hell of a lot better than I am. But there's no big popular podcaster, live streamer, certainly no one in corporate media, in mainstream media. There's no one who takes these positions. And yet they're very popular. Most Americans want Medicare for all. Most Americans want us to completely cut Israel off. There's no one who's talking that way. Virtually no one. Even among really popular YouTubers. Maybe on TikTok. I don't really follow that. 240-242-5646. You think it's just Kana saying, well, the Democratic senators caved. Kana saying, hey, Schumer orchestrated it. It wouldn't happen if Schumer wasn't behind it. He blessed it. That is what Kana says in direct opposition to Reich. But he's not the only. Look at this Pod Save, the Pod Save bros. These are the Obama guys. These are like the ultimate centrists, the ultimate insider YouTube podcaster, the podcast bros. And what do they say? Schumer orchestrated this. This is the Obama team. They're saying, yeah, Schumer gave in. Not, oh, he really couldn't hold the caucus together. They went over his head. No. 240-242-5646. Yeah, Ari calling for a Starbucks, join the Starbucks, what is it? Boycott. Yeah, don't go to Starbucks. Well, listen, I boycott Starbucks every single day of my life. I never go to Starbucks. I hate Starbucks. I don't go to any coffee shop. When I used to go to coffee shops, I never went to Starbucks. When I lived in Monterey, there was a great local coffee shop. Hat tip, shout out to Larry. He's still in business there, right there in Seaside, Acme Coffee. And you can see the Starbucks. There's a Starbucks you can see from Acme, and it always broke my heart why anyone would go to Acme when you got better coffee for less. And it was from the owner who was serving it up to you, who hand roasted those beans. Man, don't go to Starbucks. 100%. They treat the workers like crap. They're not even called employees. They're called associates. That guy, is it Howard Schultz, the founder? I think they're big Zionists too. So yes, 100%. I cannot stand Starbucks. I mean, beyond even look, the way you treat your workers is really important. I'm not saying it isn't. But as a consumer, I want to buy something I enjoy. I don't know how you could enjoy that crappy coffee anyway. All right, 240-242-5646. Just a little more, because I think it's really, really important to understand the entire Democratic Party is part of this pro-billionaire end to the shutdown. So Mediaite, also pretty conservative outlet. Deal reportedly within reach to end government shutdown. Now, who was part of that deal? See, this is what's really, I think, really relevant, is there were 8 senators, right? Just as the minimum number needed to end the shutdown, voted to end the shutdown. 8 of them, right? But allegedly, according to Axios beforehand, there were 10. At least 10. So you're telling me that Chuck Schumer didn't determine which 8, none of whom are running for re-election in 2028, which 8 of those were going to be the ones who would put their necks on the chopping block? It was all done by Schumer. The Democrats, unlike in complete opposition to what Reich said, were united. They did work together. They do. And if you want to say, well, maybe Schumer did, maybe those 10 Dems did, maybe, but it doesn't mean it. They're all bad apples. Maybe some of them are good apples, right? Maybe some of them really would, recognize Schumer is a bad leader, and they're really mad about that. right? Like maybe like one of my faves, right? Chris Van Hollen. I've talked up Chris Van Hollen. Well, the Montgomery banner came out yesterday. Chris Van Hollen for Senate Minority Leader. Don't bet on it. So this is like one of the most progressive, certainly one of the most anti-Israel senators. I think he's there with Bernie. And he's not, I'm not gonna take on Schumer. I don't want that job. No, he's fine. I got no problem with it. That's what Chris Van Hollen is saying. That's what Angela Alsobrooks said. Oh, we're okay with Schumer. We don't need a new leader. No, he's okay. It's fine. It's all good. Nothing to see here. Bernie, I haven't heard him call for Schumer's ouster. If the problem is, as it is according to Reich, allegedly, oh, it's just a bad leader. Yeah, they're like cats. You can't really hurt them, but I mean, better than Schumer. No, they're all fine with him. This is a corrupt party. This party needs to be challenged. This party needs to be confronted. 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. And I want to just respond to the argument so we can see, sure, the Democrats actually were quite disciplined. They stayed together. They maintained the shutdown for the longest in American history, apparently. And then Chuck Schumer said, let's end it. And a bunch of centrist Dems said, yeah, we've had, and not only centrist, Dick Durbin. Yeah, we're hearing from our real constituents, our donors. They want it to end. So we're going to end it. So they were perfectly disciplined. And if you say, well, they weren't disciplined because some Dems didn't want to end it. Well, yeah, I guess Ro Khanna didn't, but of course he's on the Senate, so it doesn't really matter. And Van Hollen, he's okay with it. Seems like they were pretty disciplined. As far as I can tell, there's a lot of discipline there. Every Democrat voted for Chuck Schumer to be their minority leader, and not one is challenging him now. Sounds like discipline. Every single House Democrat voted for Hakeem Jeffries to be their leader. Sounds like discipline to me. I'm not seeing any lack of discipline. And if your argument is, well, how? I mean, they're all going to unite behind the leaders. Republicans don't. They have big battles to see who are going to be their leaders, and they take them down too. Remember, there was that guy from Virginia. I forget his name. Well, there was John Boehner from Ohio, the tavern owner, or from his father was a tavern owner, whatever he was. He had to step down in favor of this Virginia guy. I can't remember his name, Eric something or other. And then he was forced out. You had Mike, was it McCarthy? Speaker McCarthy? I don't think it was Mike, but it was Speaker McCarthy. And then he was shut down, and now it's Mike Johnson. So they're constantly changing leaders, at least in the House. They're not. What did he say? They're disciplined? I don't see a lot of discipline there. Is this discipline on the Republican side? I just don't see it. Trump, look at this. This doesn't look like discipline. Trump rejects Marjorie Taylor Greene's safety concerns. He calls her he called her Marjorie Trader Greene. I don't think that's discipline on the Republican side. I think Ronald Reagan said, "Thou shalt speak no evil of thy fellow Republicans," right? Well, there's a lot of evil being spoken right now. Rand Paul is making jokes about Trump. Likewise, Massey. So this idea that the Republicans all fall in lockstep is just bogus. It's BS. And the reason, again, that the sheepdog, the Dem sheepdog, Reich is making that argument is he doesn't want you to think, well, maybe some of those Republicans aren't so bad. Maybe some of them aren't even as bad as some of the Democrats are. No, he doesn't want you to go there. Very, very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that people in media or people who are influential like Reich, who's no longer in politics, he knows how bad it is. He knows how bad the Democrats are. He knows how he was totally smirched and attacked by people like Carville and Hillary when he was in the Clinton administration. He knows that. And he still defends them. Look at this. What's the worst thing in the world right now? Apologies to the climate holocaust. I think the worst thing in the world right now is the Holocaust by Israel in Gaza, right? And we don't see unanimity on the right. In fact, the Jewish Leadership Conference in New York City, their focus is their concerns about the right. We've got to repudiate Tucker, Nick Fuentes, who's, I guess he is kind of a neo-Nazi. I haven't followed his career. And Candace Owens. Oh, this is really bad. There's conservatives turning on us. Sure doesn't look like they're all united. Doesn't look like they're all in lockstep. The point is that we on the left who recognize just how bad the Democratic support for the billionaire class, for the military has been, how much harm it's doing. We can look across the aisle and say, well, there may be a few allies. And even more than across the aisle, just in our neighborhoods, people who may vote, who may have had a Trump sign, maybe wear a MAGA hat. We may be able to join with them and get good things done. That's the last thing Robert Reich and the billionaire elite, they want us at each other's throats at all costs. All right, 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. Would love to talk to you today. Just want to get to this kind of continuing this conversation about what we need to do, what Democrats need to do. I love this quote by Gigi. She authorized me to use it. I really, really, really liked it. And again, this is the free for all. So if you got a chance and you can call in, we'll love it. Let's see how many. Kind of chat, but just mainly Ari and Splash. Had 4 or 5 on before. If you're watching and you haven't called in, we'd love to talk to you. If Democrats were to say, I love this by Gigi. That's why she said, oh, you can just copy and paste it, because I asked her to make it shareable, and she said, just copy and paste it. So that's why I copied and pasted it. If Democrats were to say Biden and Harris were to, by the way, I so agree with this. That's why I love it. I want people to take ownership. Oh, I've had people say to me, well, you don't give people any slack. You don't forgive people. And you won't forgive Hillary for all the things she did. All you do is keep bashing her over and over and over again. And my answer is, hey, I'll forgive people if they ask for forgiveness. I'll forgive people if they say, I'm sorry I did this. I'll forgive people if they show contrition. They don't have to be like totally, yeah, I'm a bad person. I shouldn't have done that. But to say, well, like, I guess sort of, like Hillary never really apologized for voting for the war on the people of Iraq. She did say, yeah, she said it was a mistake. I don't really call that an apology. But okay, if she had showed as Secretary of State that she was against interventions, like let's say she had said, no, we shouldn't bomb Libya, right? Instead of saying, we came, we saw, he's dead, or whatever she said. I would be like, well, she did say that it was a mistake to raze Iraq, R-A-Z-E, Iraq. She didn't promote killing when she was Secretary of State. So, yeah, maybe I can support her, even though she never really admitted how wrong she was, never took ownership of how bad her vote was for Iraq. But there was no learning curve. There was no reconstruction. She was totally she had the same balls as she always had. So I don't demand necessarily people fall, genuflect and apologize and say, yeah, you were right, Hal, and I was wrong. But at least show some recognition that you made mistakes and you're not going to make the same ones going forward. So Gigi says, if Dems were to say Biden and Harris were terrible, but we will nominate better people, so vote for us in 28, I'd be skeptical. Of course, who wouldn't be? But at least it's a positive argument. But when Dems praise Biden and Harris despite their move to the right, an awful record, It gives no reason to trust the party to do anything. Exactly, 100%. 100. Now, you do have to always recognize that the Democratic Party comprises, a few hundred in federal government, a few hundred electeds, and then throughout the country, probably thousands of electeds, and tens of millions, hundreds of millions, over 100 million voters. So there's a wide variety. They're not all the same. Zoran Mamdani is not Josh Gottheimer, is not Kamala Harris. They're different. But if you embrace the party, if you put a D after your name, you're saying something about yourself. And it's not necessarily a very, very good. I'll still vote for some Dems, but I'm not going to believe that a Gavin Newsom or a Kamala Harris, we're talking about the front runners in 28. I'm not going to believe there, or a Buttigieg, whatever. I'm not going to buy them as good people, as people who are going to fight for the American working class. We're going to fight for peace. And by the way, I don't say fight for me. I don't need anyone to fight for me. I'm doing fine. The people who aren't, they need allies. They need champions. And as Gigi points out, they ain't got any at the top of the Democratic Party. One response to this that I thought was really interesting was somebody who says, what do you mean move to the right? How have they moved to the right? Nobody's even talking to Harris and Biden. Biden's demanded, and Harris is, on her book tour. Well, Harris is actually, I guess, kind of moved to the left because she said she didn't do enough, or we didn't do enough to stop Israel. Didn't say what it was. He should have done differently. Could have used some levers, she said, but okay. Guess that's something. But the response was, well, they haven't moved to the left, to the right. I think there was a misunderstanding. The point of this isn't that they moved to the right since they left the White House. The point is they moved to the right when they moved into the White House. They championed genocide. They championed endless war with Russia. They extracted more petroleum than any president had ever done in a 4-year term before them. They did not, even though they said they would, support and push for a $15 minimum wage. So that's how they moved to the right. They included Joe Manchin in the negotiations and Kristen Sinema. They did not include AOC and Bernie. That's how they moved to the right. They did not, Biden said he was veto Medicare for all. Harris actually did move to the right. She said she was for fracking when she had previously been against it. She was for Medicare for all, and then she wasn't. So she actually did move to the right. Clearly, the party needs to embrace, as a litmus test, true economic populism, true wealth redistribution, if it wants to win elections, if it wants to win over the American public. That's the answer. And it just simply won't do that. It refuses to do that. And the reason it refuses, one, each individual representative, each individual elected really would face, to be fair to them, if they stood up alone like a Bernie does, they would face a lot of opprobrium, attacks. By the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene is facing right now for standing up to Trump. She says she's being threatened. People are threatening her lives. They're sending pizzas to her house. Pretty awful. And yet I know there are MAGA people who agree with her, right? I mean, they're the ones who, go to Turning Point USA and ask hard questions of J.D. Vance about support for Israel. But Trump also has his loyalty. We're in a frightening time. We need someone to just party, but we need institutions that will champion poor, struggling, and working people, and that will reject the blandishments of 1% and the military class. And it's very, very, very. One other point I want to discuss in response to that post by, or in support of, or in addition to, or as addition to this. Dems were to acknowledge Biden and Harris were terrible, but we'll nominate better people, so vote for us. You'd be skeptical, but okay. We'd at least consider. We say, hey, yeah, you seem to be getting it finally. But one response I got, one was, well, they didn't move to the right. Another was, Americans don't want leftists. Americans are more comfortable with conservatives than progressives. And I want to show you some of these comments. I think they're very, very interesting. We're going to start with the first one, which I kind of didn't like. Okay, I mean, it was, I guess, a compliment to me, but I didn't like it. So they write, I don't know a lot, and my knowledge base is not well researched as house. Okay, I don't believe that. I know who this person is. They know a lot. Their research base is well researched. Their knowledge base is well researched. They just have come to different conclusions than I have, and I think there are also a little bit of a connection. Maybe I'm wrong to the Democratic Party. Maybe to a degree they're insiders. So when you're an insider, I'm not saying that you're corrupt, but I'm saying is there's a conflict. You know the people. You know the Democratic electeds. You know some of them. They've been nice to you. They're friendly. They may well be really nice people, and you can't see the harm they're doing because you're inside the forest. You can't see the harm they're doing outside of it. So I don't like that. I don't know a lot. My knowledge base is not as well researched as Hal's. Look, make your arguments. You think you're wrong? If you read mine and my response and the evidence you don't think supports it, change your opinion. It seems there are questions we often overlook when we analyze the political landscape. For whatever reason, I believe there are many. The right is generally better than the left at winning support from average people in elections. I don't think that's true at all. I don't accept that. It depends on the election. More Americans vote for Democrats. I mean, we have a political system that's definitely provides, advantages to the Republicans because of the way congressional districts are drawn, because of the Electoral College, which favors smaller states. But most people, even now, more people vote for Democrats than Republicans. So I don't agree that average people are more likely to support the right. I think they figured out how to game the system better in some respects because Democrats are often fighting with one hand tied behind their back. They're not going to fight the right. They're only going to fight the left. So they're pushing against the very policies that people want. I also don't agree with the statement the right has a lock on the wealthy. It's just not true at all. For example, some of the richest Congress members are in fact Democrats. Pritzker, he's a real billionaire, unlike Trump, right? That's what he said. Pelosi, very rich. Ro Khanna, very rich. There's plenty of rich Democrats. So Mark Cuban, I think, is a Democrat. Wasn't Zuckerberg for a while a Democrat? Kennedys are Democrats. They're rich. So no, I don't. They're the richest, the most affluent do tend to be more right. But yeah, because the policies that Republicans support keep their taxes lower. But I don't think Democrats by any means have given up on the wealthy. In fact, they pander to the wealthy. What the Democrats should do is support pro-worker policies since there are more workers than there are billionaires. Anyway, continuing. I mean, this is what I've been saying. This is no news. The question is, would political candidates moving further to the left help to salvage any? Well, I wish they would move to the left a little bit because they haven't moved to the left. So I don't know how you can move further to the left if you haven't moved to the left. Would they help salvage any vestiges of the New Deal? And then they go on to say in other progressive policies, it's a lot easier to be conservative than to be progressive. And then they explain that. So I'll leave that for now. Being conservative requires less thinking, less creativity. I think that is true because conservative solutions do tend to be very simple and they're sound bites, like no men in women's locker rooms, right? Like that's one of their big things, right? No men in women's locker rooms, girls locker rooms. So that's easy. What's a Democratic soundbite? Well, we need this complex kludge of a healthcare system that's going to provide all sorts of incentives to consumer and to the provider of healthcare to make sure that everyone pretty much is covered. And then we're going to take a lot of money from taxpayers and we're going to use subsidies, right? One is like no men and girls locker rooms. The other is like a long-winded, impossible to understand explanation for healthcare. Or if the Republican response would be no socialized medicine. That's easy to understand, right? Because what they're saying is, hey, you want these subsidies and you want these incentives and you know what? How about Medicare for all? How about just saying that? Medicare for all. Everybody in, nobody out. Now, that's a simple message. That doesn't require a lot of thinking. How about free buses? Doesn't require a lot of thinking. You just understand it. I get on the bus. I don't have to pay a fare, right? That worked, didn't it? So what Democrats need to do is come up with slogans, which aren't really that hard to come up with, that don't require you to think too hard about them. But they don't, because easy to understand slogans like free buses, rent freeze, universal single-payer health coverage, those are not what the billionaire class wants. The billionaire class wants lots of complicated, expensive solutions that are going to require all sorts of subsidies to them and incentives to them and ways that they can game the system. So that's why right now being conservative requires less thinking, not because there's something inherently more simplistic about conservatism. All right, 240-242-5646. All right, I will just end the program at this point. This was my response. I'm going to show it because I was very pleased with it. I thought I did view on this issue. So you raise a very important question. I would say that on economic matters and foreign policy, American voters are far to left of both parties. We truly want peace and a reasonably equitable society. Medicare for all and higher taxes on the wealthy are extremely popular, as is a $15 minimum wage. Israel is extremely unpopular. By the way, so is the Iraq War. Most Americans opposed Biden's ongoing support for the Ukraine war when he was president. I remember I had Arlen on. We were debating this very question. And he was saying, I don't think most Americans oppose our ongoing billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine. And I showed him a CNN poll, which CNN, by the way, supported all of that money to Ukraine. And it was like, no, we don't like it. We're against it. Big reason Trump won, because Americans didn't support the Ukraine war. Most Americans want peace and they want a reasonably equitable society. That's pretty simple to understand. Now, where it gets a little murkier is cultural and race-specific issues. So I say safe and legal abortion, gay marriage. I think most support now, I think abortion is choice is the preference. But certainly gay marriage, most support. Trans girls and women and girls' locker rooms, no, most oppose that. Reparations, immigration policies were deeply divided. So the answer is on economic issues, which, by the way, those are pretty obvious. Everyone should have health care. That's not a hard one to understand. We should. That doesn't require a lot of debate. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of weighing competing interests. What's the competing interest against giving everyone health care, making sure that when you go to the doctor, it's paid for? There's no competing interest. Even the argument, there's no interest against that. Even the argument, well, you're making someone else pay for some 2-year-old's healthcare. That's not right. That's the parent's job. Even that argument fails because we all would pay less. Ultimately, it would be cheaper. We would live in a more efficient healthcare environment. And taxes, total outlay for healthcare would go down, and total health would go up with the universal single payer. So there's no competing interest opposing Medicare for all. There's no legitimate competing interest against much higher taxes on the wealthy. There's none. There's no legitimate argument against it. I'm not going to get into why that it's a fact. Some people will say that's crazy. You're still taking money from people. Yeah, you're taking money from people who don't need it, who have far more than they should ever be allowed to have. So there's no competing interest. Now, when it comes to gay marriage, I don't see there's any competing interest. It doesn't devalue traditional marriage in any way to let two men or two women get married. None. And that's why most Americans support it. Because they're like, well, it's fine. If you want to argue there's competing interests against abortion and for it, I think that's fair. I really do. By the way, I haven't even done this. Click like, click subscribe. Click like, click subscribe. 240-242-5646. I think an abortion there is. But here's where I come down on these issues. The cultural issues, there shouldn't be a litmus test to be a Democrat. You want to be opposed to reparations? You can still be a Democrat as long as you believe you want to be opposed to reparations for American descendants of slaves? Okay, you can be a Democrat as long as you believe every single one of those descendants deserves and should be getting single-payer health coverage that the government pays for. As long as you believe that every single one of those descendants of slaves should be subject to a top marginal income tax rate of 95% if they're making $10 million a year, like a very, very successful business person might be, or a successful entertainer. Yes, as long as the rules apply to all, and we're going to demand that everyone has enough and no one has too much. You want to be for reparations, you can be a Democrat. You want to be against it, you can be a Democrat. You want to be for expanding the rights of trans people and determining whether a person is treated, for purposes of the law as a woman or a man based on, or a girl or a boy based on their gender as opposed to their sex. Fine, you can have that position. You can be a Democrat, or you can take the opposite position. You can say that sex at conception should determine what your rights are when it comes to issues that relate to sex, such as competing on sports teams. As long as you believe that we're going to protect everyone's right to compete fairly for a job, right? I mean, that seems to me trans straight or trans, I don't like the term cis, but we'll use it for this purpose because I'm not sure what else to use. Trans, non-trans. Two people are competing for a job. You have to be treated equally, treated the same. If trans person is more qualified, they should get the job. The non-trans person is more qualified, they get the job. That should be the litmus test for Democrats, not whether you support hormone treatment for trans youth. That should not be a litmus test. You can Big Ten when it comes to those issues. It's a small 10 when it comes to taxes on the rich. You have to be for them, higher taxes. It's a small 10 when it comes to guaranteeing everyone a home. Everyone gets a home. Everyone gets help. All right, that's going to do it for me. Thank you all for being part of Halitics. Huge props to all of my viewers. I so appreciate you. And I will say, just so you know, I'll be here all week. We're going to have the Left-Handed Leftist Friday. Tomorrow's an Orlin Tuesday. And next week, I believe we'll have Carlos again. Maybe not Monday. And I'll be on Tuesday next week. And then I'm off for the rest of the Thanksgiving Day week. Enjoy your afternoon if you're on the East Coast, and wherever else you are, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much.